Welcome back to the part 2 of ScaleForm pipeline. In the first video we had our Swift file generated. Now we want to bring our asset to CryEngine and show it on the screen and fire up one of our functions. So let's start where we left off. Actually, I'm gonna archive some of these files to have a clean view of what we've done so far. Our Inkscape design and our FXG file. Also the SWD file here, which is the Flash debug file generated by Adobe Flash where we started debugging our ActionScript functions. Now we're left with our Flash file and our published Swift file here, which is going to be the asset we'll be taking into the engine. In order to put our Swift file to the engine, we have to convert it to a GFX. In our simple file here, we can just simply rename our Swift to a GFX and it would work. But in the production, if you have used other unsupported contents inside your Flash file, they can't be read by CryEngine. So a GFX exporter tool is shipped with the engine to rescue us. Now let's convert our Swift file by using CryEngine GFX exporter. We have to go where we installed CryEngine. Mine is a pretty long way. I'm going to my D drive, program files x86, CryDeck, CryEngine launcher, CryEngine, and finally CryEngine 5.1. Now you can see there's a tool folder here. I'm gonna go inside. Here is a complete list of tools shipped with the engine, which in our case we're going to use the GFX export. So I'm gonna go inside this. GFX export tool is simply a command line executable file that in most cases is capable of converting a Swift file to GFX using default settings. In our case we're going to simply drag and drop our Swift file into it. And as you can see, we'll get our GFX file right where our Swift file was stored. Now that we have our GFX file, let's see where should we put it in our project folder. I'm going to go to CryEngine's online documentation. Under technical documentation, CryEngine game code, miscellaneous game code, user interface, and UI element to make sure where we should put things. As you can see, it says our UI element should be defined as an XML script file and put somewhere in our game folder in the libs directory under UI into UI elements folder. I don't have a game folder yet, so let's make one. I'm going to go to my launcher and create a new project, a 5.1 project as a C++, which is blank, and I'm going to name it Our Awesome Test and put it to my E drive into Awesome Test folder. Now I'm going to push Create Project, and here we go. I have an Awesome Test project here. Now let's open our project folder on E drive Awesome Test, and now we have a basic folder structure to start with. Obviously we have to go somewhere in our asset folder to put our assets into engine. So I'm going to go inside and aha, here is the libs folder. Let's see the documentation again. Game SDK /libs/UI/UI elements for the XML file. So let's go inside the libs, and where is UI? We don't see it, which means we are going to create it. Inside again, no UI elements of course, so here we go, and we are done. Basically this is where we put our HUD or menu assets in our game folder. Under assets, libs, UI, and the XML scripts will go inside the UI elements folder here. We already have our GFX file, but we also need an XML script file to introduce our HUD to the engine. So I'm going to right click here and make a new empty text document. Name it Awesome HUD and also change the file type from TXT to XML. And yes, we know what we're doing here. Now I'm going to get back to the UI folder and put my Awesome HUD in there. And you know what? I'm also going to copy this name to my XML file here. Just because when your project grows, it's going to make it a lot easier to find which XML is for which GFX file. Now let's take another look to what we did. In our project folder, assets, libs, we created a UI folder, put our GFX file there, and then created a UI elements folder and put an empty XML file here to describe our GFX file for CryEngine. So what is an XML anyway? Let's take a look at this. XML is simply a structure to build objects in a way your computer would understand. Every object is defined between two angle brackets. You also need to tell the computer where your object starts and where it ends. So a / is also going to be used to say where your object ends. Let's say you're going to talk about your room. This is simply a way of telling your computer I'm talking about an object and it's my room. Your room also starts after an open angle brackets and ends when there is a forward slash. Pretty easy to understand, but what if we were going to tell what is inside your room? In this case, you need to take that forward slash and write another object with the same name that starts with a forward slash, like this. This is actually exactly the same. Your room starts in the first line and your room ends in the second line. The only difference now is that you can put other objects inside your room, like a closet and a desk. And if your closet contains something, you'd say you have coats and shoes in there. This was half of the XML you just learned. The other half is about attributes. Let's look at your room again. It would be boring if you could just structure your room like this. What if your room is 10 square meter? Well, this is how you say it. You simply say your room has a size and is equal to 10 in double quotes. How about a wall color? Now your room has a blue wall color as defined. That's pretty much all about XML. Let's read our final XML here and see what we got then. We have a room which is 10 in size and has a blue wall color. Inside this room we have a closet which is wooden in type and contains coats and shoes. We go out of closet and there is a wooden desk in room named Ben. Then we go out of room. If you had no problem reading our XML, you are totally ready to write your own XML defining your GFX for CryEngine now. The thing about writing an XML for CryEngine is that you need to use object names that make sense to the engine, and we are going to do a basic one here to give you the idea. So let's get back to our awesome hot XML. I'm gonna open my empty XML file with Notepad to edit so everyone can follow up, but you can use some fancy editor like Notepad++. Now we're going to introduce our awesome HUD to CryEngine. First we have to say we're going to talk about UI elements. We are going to define one UI element at this time. Our UI element has a GFX and a set of functions. We also have two functions to expose in the engine. So I'm going to take that forward slash and go inside and say function twice. Also let's put some spaces so we can read it more easily. Now our GFX is going to contain some constraints. This is where CryEngine looks to see how it should draw this GFX to the screen. And we are going to use align constraint to define them. Now let's put two attributes to our GFX, a file and a layer. So CryEngine knows which file it should load and in which layer it is going to be. The file is myawesomehot.gfx and I'm going to put 1 in the layer. Also let's tell CryEngine that this UI element's name is awesome group and this element we are talking about is d_awesome. Now let's talk about align constraints. Align has 5 attributes: a mode, h-align, v-align, scale and max. In order to fully understand these attributes, you're going to have to check out the documentation. There's a constraints section to give you the idea, but for now I'm going to put full screen in mode and I'm going to say center for both h-align and v-align and go 1 for scale and 1 for max. This way we are going to draw our HUD centered in full screen by keeping the aspect ratio. You are always welcome to check the documentation to see what are these constraints doing. Now let's talk about our two functions. First I'm going to expand them so we can put a parameter child in there. The attributes here are very simple. We have a name which is going to be the name shown by the engine. I'm going to put getArrowX here, and then there's a func name which is going to look at your GFX file and find the function with the same name here. In our case it was getArrowPoseX if I remember correctly. Now for our second function I'm going to simply copy and paste these attributes and change them to setArrowX and setArrowPoseX. Now let's talk about the parameter. What this param is going to do here is it's simply going to expose a parameter listener for your function in the engine. Our get function didn't expect a parameter to get passed in, so we can get rid of it here and close the getArrowX function with a forward slash. But for our setArrowX function here, we are expecting an x value to come in. So we're going to tell CryEngine this parameter is going to be named x, and there is a description and a type. The type is going to be a float number. We can't say number here because it's not ActionScript here. For numbers in the engine, we use integers or floats in most cases, and a float is simply a number like 100.0 or 15.7. And for description, we are going to say what this x input is for, which sets current position of arrow. This description will be shown if you hover your mouse on the x in FlowGraph later. This is it. That's all we have to tell CryEngine about our simple HUD here. So let's save this and close. We can now go to Launcher and open up our project. I'm going to create a new level and call it a sample level and change the height map resolution to 128 by 128. Pretty small as we have nothing to do with level design right now. Now if we go in here and jump into the game, we see a simple plane and the sky and a camera that can move with WASD, nothing else. So let's press escape and draw our HUD to the screen by using a FlowGraph node. On your Create Object panel, go to Entity and under Default, choose FlowGraph Entity. I'm going to drag and drop one to this level and change its name here to D_HUD. This FlowGraph entity does nothing. Consider it a dummy object we're putting inside the level so we can assign the actual FlowGraph node to it. This way, when we jump into the game, CryEngine becomes aware of our FlowGraph node and takes it into account. So we need to right-click on it and create a FlowGraph for it, which is the actual FlowGraph. And I'm going to name this D_HUD_FG. And I'm also going to make it full screen to have a bit more space to work. Now we want to draw our HUD to the screen whenever the game starts in this level. So let's look at the components we have. I'll go for game here. Looking down the list, there's a start node, which is what we want. So I'm going to drag it here. The output from this node tells the engine what to do when game has started. We can also press Q for quick search and type start, then use your arrow keys to switch between 10 results. The first one is AI action start, so I'm going to go ahead and push the down arrow key, AI sequence, custom action, and here it is, game start. Now we want to tell the engine to display our HUD when game starts. So I'm going to go for Q again, type display. I don't want debug message, so next, display time debug, next, UI display advanced, have no idea, next, display config, next, constraints, not what I want, next again, UI display, here it is, this is what we want. So I'm going to click on it and we're going to put a flow connection from our game start output to trigger the show parameter here. What it's going to do is that whenever our game starts, it will fire a show order on this display node for the UI. And the element here is what it's going to show, which is empty now, but let's select display node and put an input to the element here. Click right here to see this choose button. Select it, and when you see the choose UI element dialog, you will be able to see D_awesome as defined in XML. If you don't, double check the XML file. If you have other UI elements, they will be available here. But for now, we just have one element, so I'm going to choose D_awesome and press OK. Now you can see our element is equal to D_awesome, and when the game starts, D_awesome is going to get drawn to the screen. So let's close the graph and see if everything works. I'll jump to the game and ta-da! Our awesome HUD is showing up. Now let's see if we can fire our functions from within the FlowGraph. Here we go. Select our FlowGraph entity, right click, choose the HUD FG. I'm going full screen again. Now we can press Q and search for our function by the name we given it in the XML. But to make it clear where will things go for UI elements, let's go here and find it manually. I'm going to push this a little bit to make more space. Then we'll go down until we see UI. Here. Then we ask ourselves, what have we defined for our awesome HUD? The answer is functions. So we go for functions. Then haha, you see the awesome category here. Then we get excited and open it up and we see our two tiny little awesome functions here, which I'm going to choose the set arrow x1 and hard code the x value to 1200 here, and then quick search for key and find input key to assign a key press to fire up our function. I'm also going to choose G for the input key, so whenever I press G in game, a flow line would fire out of this pressed here, and I'm going to attach it to call our function and set the value of x to 1200. Now let's get back to the viewport. Jump into the game, and then when I press G, as you can see, our function will fire and puts the arrow in 1200 pixel position based on our flash file coordinates. That's it. That was the overall pipeline I was going to show you about a simple HUD in CryEngine. And I hope these two videos have given you the idea behind what you can achieve with ScaleForm. Also, let's take a look at our getArrowX function. As you can see, there is no input here because we didn't define any parameter for it in our XML, comparing to our setArrowX, which does have X as a parameter. And I think it's pretty much all about the basics. You can take a look at Game SDK's XML to see how much more data can be offered to the engine. And the documentation is always there to get you through the details. So I guess I'm done for now. I hope it was a good amount for you to get started with. Have a good journey into the CryEngine, and bye.